want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflakes here, back with a new Chaos Zero Nightmare video. For today's video, I'm going to go over the new character, CHIZURU, who is a Void Psionic character. She is quite fun. I guess just like if you don't want to watch the rest of the video, I'll give you the short summary here. She is not broken by any means, but she represents a sort of gameplay that is very unique to herself, just because of how she stacks up her Shadow of the Moon cards. And if you're into playing a character who has a lot of strong hit cards, a lot of rather multi-hit cards, if you're into a character that has a really strong aesthetic because her animations and her gameplay is really clean in my opinion, and you don't mind playing a character who doesn't necessarily rank well on the leaderboards or even has like really absurd interactions, then CHIZURU will be just fine. She isn't going to be breaking the game, she isn't going to be hitting absurd one-turn kills for the most part, or like low min-turn kills. She'll probably still be able to hit two-turn or three-turn kills with certain decks, but that'll be with support from like forbidden cards and stuff. Her kit by itself is very, very fair, and I think Smilegate is directly planning on making the game a little bit more lower power level than it was on the initial release. And with the advent of like Haru, CHIZURU, and Yuki, I think they're pushing that quite strongly. So if you want a character that's super broken, like Tressa level broken or Malin Luke level broken, then CHIZURU sadly is not that, but she is extremely fun. I think I have a lot of fun playing her in Chaos and building her decks and playing her interactions myself. So I would still recommend pulling her if you value fun over just raw output. So going into her partner selection, obviously I am a free-to-play person, so I didn't bother pulling for her partner because I'm trying to save for like the Tenebria ult that's going to come out eventually. So I'm just playing with Zatera. I do have Eloise, but Eloise doesn't really work that great with CHIZURU because CHIZURU has no form of exhaust, nor does she have any form of status ailment. So that means Eloise, with her value being mainly when you exhaust something or play a status effect, or when with her ego skill, obviously it's when you exhaust a card. None of these synergize with CHIZURU, so sadly you are pretty much stuck to Zatera. Now Zatera is just a massive downgrade to CHIZURU's actual partner, because CHIZURU's actual partner comes with the exact same passive with getting more attack, but also comes with a lot more auxiliary effects for an SSR. So CHIZURU is unfortunately one of the rare characters that gets a massive buff with having a proper partner, instead of something like Mei Lin or Veronica, who gets pretty good buffs for having a proper partner, but is otherwise very functional without them. Now, for CHIZURU's Epiphany skills, you're going to be running with the standard 2 strike 1 shield deck, along with the 5 actual unique cards. We're going to talk about her mythic card first, just because that's what most of her kit revolves around. So her mythic card is going to be Shadow of the Moon, which is going to be a 1-mana attack card. It's going to have a unique tag called Bind, and it's going to have Retain, so it stays in your hand. Notice again that there is no exhaust on this, and notice that the base version of this card does not have unique, so this card will show up in your replicate/dupe events or copy events, and I would never suggest clicking this to dupe, because it is very irrelevant and very redundant to duplicate this card because of how bind works. Now, the card at its base level is going to be 50% damage, and then for each bind stack, you're going to get plus 20% damage amount. And then when you hit bind 3, so when you get 3 copies of Shadow of the Moon, basically each Shadow of the Moon will automatically fuse into itself, even when you're at the bind cap. So if you're at bind 5, you really want to use that ASAP if you care about the efficiency of your Shadow of the Moons. When you're at bind 3, it'll automatically transform into Shadow of the Moon Plus, which is going to again come with the unique tag. It's going to come with slightly better base damage, 70% instead of 50%, and it's going to come with a 2 base multi-hit. And then when you cast it, you're also going to recover 5% max HP. Note that recover is not heal, so this will not recover stress, and it will also come with the plus 20% damage amount per bind stack. Now, an important thing to note with this spell is that you should cast it immediately at bind 1 or at bind 3, because you actually don't get much value for keeping it at bind 2 or bind 4 or even bind 5, just because of how the rest of your kit works. You're actually meant to cycle this ASAP, and if you want to save up until bind 5 because you're using certain skills or strategies, that's totally fine, but just be aware that if you're trying to get the maximum quote-unquote value from Shadow of the Moon, it will be played at bind 3 or bind 1 most of the time. Now, going into the non-mythic cards, Karmic Flames is going to be one of your first starting cards. It's going to be a 1-mana attack, come with initiation, and it's going to keep initiation, so you'll always see this in your starting hand unless you have too many initiations to actually draw properly. It's going to do a good amount of damage, 106% at base, and apply Curse Shackles to your opponent. Curse Shackles is a unique debuff. You cannot stack this, so you can only have one applied at any time. And if you use Curse Shackles or apply Curse Shackles to a different opponent, your older Curse Shackles will disappear. Now, Curse Shackles is going to be a debuff where when you hit the opponent, CHIZURU will gain 1 Will-O-Wisp per hit count. This can be CHIZURU herself hitting the opponent or an ally hitting the opponent, but basically, the more hits you do, the more Will-O-Wisps you get. And when you hit 5 Will-O-Wisps, you're going to generate a Shadow of the Moon. So this is going to be your main way of generating Will-O-Wisps and Shadow of the Moons to get to those bind 3, bind 4, bind 5 levels on Shadow of the Moon. And then each Karmic Flames is going to have some interaction with Curse Shackles for the most part. The base version is going to be adding 1 hit, so if you, and it won't apply to its original hit. So you have to, or rather, you only get the Curse Shackles effect after the first cast. So you'll need to dupe the card, or actually, yeah, you just need to dupe the card if you want to be able to get the Curse Shackle effect immediately on turn 1. Otherwise, you have to wait for the full shuffle and then play Karmic Flames again. So for Epiphanies, the first Epiphany is going to be a slightly stronger version of the base. You're going to get plus 50% base damage to Karmic Flames, and that's about it. This is very alright. I would recommend getting this if you have no better options. This first option is basically better than everything but the second option in my opinion, and also better than generic Epiphanies. So the only reason why you wouldn't click on this is because you're getting the second Epiphany, which is going to be the same base damage, except the Curse Shackle effect is going to be decreasing the cost of the next card of this unit used by 1. So again, second cast, never going to be active on the first cast. When you play this version, you're only going to hit once, but your next card from CHIZURU is going to be -1 mana. This will allow you to cycle more cards. It'll allow you to play your Shadow of the Moons for 0 mana. It'll allow you to play all of the rest of the cards for 0 mana. And in my opinion, her main team is going to be with Cassius, so that'll be extra fuel for 000 outside of Chaos. This is the one I would take every time, and I wouldn't recommend getting this on Divine Epiphany just because it is fairly low value, just because you're not really prioritizing the card. So just having a generic Epiphany on this second one is really good. Third option is going to be higher base damage. I think it's like 180% base damage. Not really sure because I have the potentials already. And then the Curse Shackle effect is going to be doubling the damage or increasing your damage amount by 100%. So this one is very, again, I would pick this over other like non-unique Epiphanies, but at that point your run is a little bit less happy. It will make the card a bit decent of a nuke, but you're going to be generating less Will-O-Wisps, and obviously her main kit revolves around Shadow of the Moon, and hitting once with a much stronger Karmic Flames is benefiting that aspect less. The fourth Epiphany is going to be a 2-mana skill, and you're going to create 1 Shadow of the Moon by using it. No damage. It's just essentially generating 5 Will-O-Wisps. I think this is probably the weakest Karmic Flames. Oh no, this is the second weakest Karmic Flames. It does have some value, but it's quite expensive, and obviously with other spells in CHIZURU's arsenal, this ends up being a very low benefit ability. And her final unique Epiphany for Karmic Flames is going to have an exhaust effect, and then it's going to come with the effect of when you kill the target inflicted with Curse Shackles, you create this card. Now, there's an entire question of whether or not this is going to be an exact copy. So if you have this as a Divine Epiphany with like a +1 morale, maybe it's like plus AP or whatever, there is maybe a reality where you want to cast this and then generate extra copies of those Divine Epiphanies and just duplicate it over and over and over again. But this card is terrible otherwise. Like, this is only good in an AoE scenario, except it's super expensive to reapply more than once, and it's not even that great if you reapply it. So it's going to come down to whether or not you want to be experimental with that AoE CHIZURU aspect and getting a lot of permanent buffs, if it works that way. But I don't know if it works that way because I've never clicked on it because it's not that good of a card. So yeah, again, the first and second are your best options. Do not bother replicating this. It's just a decent card, but nothing great. The second Epiphany, or second card, is going to be Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi is going to be a 0 mana skill card, and the base effect is going to be 2 Will-O-Wisps for each hit on the next attack card of this unit used. So obviously this will scale very well with multi-hits. If you're using something like Shadow of the Moon with 3 hits, this will generate 6 Will-O-Wisps. So you're getting +1 Shadow of the Moon with that, with 1 extra Will-O-Wisp left over. For the Epiphany effects, the first Epiphany is going to be, once again, a generic upgrade to that original card. You're going to get 3 Will-O-Wisps for each hit instead of just 2, which is quite strong. this is probably the most like generic, okay, like it's not that great, but it's very alright Epiphany, because you can get a lot of Will-O-Wisps in one turn if you play this, but I would not recommend duping this. The second Epiphany for Tsukuyomi is going to be adding 1 hit to the next attack card this unit used, and then getting only 1 Will-O-Wisp per hit. And if you're wondering if this is good with something like Portrait of Fury, this actually does not increase the card draw from Portrait of Fury. I was testing this in Chaos, and when you use this with Portrait of Fury will only draw off of the hits generated by itself. So giving it more hits will not give you extra cards, in case you're trying to abuse that at all. This card is also really bad because if you stack this card, it doesn't actually add more hits to the next card. It just gives you like a longer it's like a stack generation. So you'll get more and more cards in a row that get +1 hit, but that card itself will never get like +17, right? You can't actually make a card like a non Shadow of the Moon card get way more hits, because obviously third Epiphany you can see on screen is giving Shadow of the Moon more hits, and that actually does stack. But the second one does not stack on one card. It stacks across multiple cards, which is not really what you're looking for when you're going for funny memes with that spell. So the third Epiphany is going to be one that's pretty funny, pretty memey. You'll probably see videos of people stacking this up and doing like 100 hit Shadow of the Moons on certain bosses. This will be adding 2 hits to the next Shadow of the Moon or Shadow of the Moon plus used. And I haven't played this myself, but there's already posts on Reddit of people going like 30 hits. So somehow between the second Epiphany and third Epiphany, the second Epiphany does not stack properly, but third Epiphany does. And so if you want to do those memes, then go for it. It will work. This one should be duplicated if you want to go for those memes, while the first two should not be. The fourth one is going to be 3 Will-O-Wisp for each attack card of this unit in hand. Unfortunately, I think this is actually just a really bad version of the first original Epiphany. I would never recommend taking this. If you get this and you get like 2 like +1 resolve or like +1 morale options included with it, that's probably a run restart if you're going for a good CHIZURU build, or I'd rather just even take +1 morale with the original Tsukuyomi card over this, because I think that would generate more value for CHIZURU overall. And then the fifth Tsukuyomi upgrade, Epiphany, is going to be an upgrade card. It's going to be unique, so you can't duplicate this, and a lead. And it's going to read, when an attack card is used, gain 2 Will-O-Wisp. This is the most generically safe upgrades in my opinion, because it stacks really well with a lot of our other cards. It even allows you to refund Will-O-Wisps when you use Shadow of the Moon Plus as well. The only issue is that it's not as memey as a third Epiphany is. It's just a very straightforward upgrade. You cast it once, your deck is now a bit thinner. You get more consistent generation from Will-O-Wisp card or from her attack cards, and we'll see a Oni Hunt card that directly synergizes with this upgrade spell, which doesn't really synergize that well with any other of these Tsukuyomi options. But I would personally pick number 5 if you're going for a standard CHIZURU build. Number 3 is a lot better for the memes, and if you're just trying to clear the run, the first one is very good as well. The next Epiphany card is going to be Bound at Dusk. This is going to be an upgrade card, probably the most contentious / controversial card for CHIZURU. It's going to be initiation and unique, so you cannot dupe it. It keeps the unique tag throughout all the Epiphanies. At the start of the turn, gain Inhibit. And Inhibit will prevent you from gaining AP, except at the start of the turn or on Ravage. And so this means that you cannot use stuff like Mika, you can't get Wave, you can't use God Epiphanies to give you +1 AP. These will all be prevented. Ironically enough, when I was playing with this card, the monster that there are some monsters that like take away AP from you, or rather the forbidden card once that's a curse, I think Eternal Hunger, that card will no longer subtract AP. So I think ironically the developers have coded Eternal Hunger to be +(-1), and so it actually means that the Eternal Hunger card is a lot less impactful, like not even at all, because you no longer get affected by that low, or you no longer get affected by that debuff, which is ironic. But regardless, you also gain +1 hit to Shadow of the Moon or Shadow of the Moon Plus by having Inhibit active, so this does make your Shadow of the Moon a bit stronger, but unfortunately it comes with no longer be able to abuse stuff like Mika properly. Now the other text on Bound at Dusk generically is going to be decreasing the cost of 1 random card until it's used. So it's kind of like their, I guess, like pity system of like saying, oh, you can't gain AP, but you can discount some cards. So this card is automatically a little iffy unless you know what you're doing or have a really efficient build for CHIZURU specifically. For the Epiphany upgrades, the first one is going to be, again, an upgraded version of the original card. Instead of only reducing 1 card, you're going to reduce 2 cards by 1. And it is important to note that these can be, if it hits a retain card or you discard that card, when you redraw it, it'll still be discounted by 1. So this card is just genetically very good. If you don't have E2 CHIZURU, I recommend always going for this one because it is just a very good discount across the board. It's essentially plus 2 AP for CHIZURU, and if you're not using Mika or if you're in Chaos, this is basically a stronger Mika effect within Chaos. But obviously, once you exit Chaos and you have stuff like Nia with Eternal Hunger cycling, you have like triple source of water Mika, it becomes a lot more suspicious. But the issue is that not having Bound at Dusk and not having Inhibit active means that your Shadow of the Moons are way weaker. So it's kind of a trade-off, but regardless. The second Bound at Dusk active or upgrade is going to be when you use Shadow of the Moon Plus, you decrease the cost of the next card by 1. Or next card play by 1. So this is a lot more flexible of an upgrade. You do have to cast 2 Shadow of the Moons in order to have it equal the value of the original Bound at Dusk or the first Epiphany, which is the reason why I would say that E2 CHIZURU is a lot more impactful. Just skipping ahead a bit, E2 CHIZURU is the effect is that when you cast a Shadow of the Moon Plus, you generate a bind 1 Shadow of the Moon. So that's why it's a lot better with that, because you're getting a lot more Shadow of the Moon pluses with E2 CHIZURU compared to E0 CHIZURU. Now, you can get some pretty good effects with this Bound at Dusk effect, just because obviously, once again, with the Karmic Flames effect that lets you play the next card for free. Between that and this Bound at Dusk upgrade, you can cycle 0 costs pretty efficiently if you're able to get all those active. But it will run out at some point, so you can't go like actual infinite like you would with Tressa and Cassius and Mika, because obviously, again, there's Inhibit being active. But you can get a pretty long turn, and you can get a lot of value with Cassius because of 000 procs. So I think Bound at Dusk is probably the highest cap for CHIZURU with E2, and maybe even E0 if you have a really efficient build. But otherwise, the first Epiphany is a lot safer. Now, the third and fourth Epiphanies for Bound at Dusk are equally odd. The third one is going to be activate 2 random cards of other combatants, whereas the fourth one is activate 2 random lead cards. They're essentially the same thing, but I think the third one is a lot more consistent because getting lead cards is really inconsistent in general, because not many characters have lead cards, and then you have to draw the lead card on turn start in order to activate it to begin with. So I would say that if you're trying to go for like this AFK CHIZURU style, the third one's always good, and I would never click the fourth one unless somehow you have a bunch of lead cards active and you own Magna and you want to go Magna and you have like some idea in your head that will look really funny to just autoplay. And then the fifth Bound at Dusk is going to be kind of a slight side grade, mostly a downgrade to the first one, where you're going to decrease the card of the highest cost by 2. So it's going to focus that one card. And so if you have 2 costs, like let's say you get the Ha0 neutral card, this will make that a lot more efficient to play because it'll be 0 cost. But usually you'll have mostly 1 costs as any deck. And so if you want to play Ha0 or you want to play cards that have much higher cost in general, then the final Bound at Dusk upgrade has a higher peak for RNG, but the first one is just more consistent because you spread it across and you have a lot more 1 cost to drop down to 0. So this is a card you can't duplicate, and I would look only for the first and second ones. And this one, going for God Epiphany, is a little bit better because since it's a upgrade card, that means that the morale/resolve buffs will give you will be permanent. But I'd still recommend not going for God Epiphanies just because with the proper team, aka Cassius, you'll be getting a lot of morale buffs anyways. So unless you're not running Cassius and you need that morale stacking to actually let CHIZURU do damage, I would not waste Fate Memory on those God Epiphanies on this card in particular. Now, the next card, Oni Hunt, is probably going to be the sauciest card that CHIZURU has and will determine most of your memes, besides obviously the Tsukuyomi hit stacking Epiphany. This is a 1 mana attack with haste, so it will not reduce your opponent's action count. It's going to be at base 64%, or I think like 60% damage, plus 3, or with 3 hits, and then the base effect is going to be plus 30% amount to your next bind card used. So it'll just be a plus 30. If you have the Inhibit active and you're using Shadow Moon Plus, this is effectively plus 90 flat damage to that card, which is very decent. For the Epiphanies, first one, as always, is going to be an upgrade to the base version. It's going to drop the damage slightly, but give you an extra hit, so 50 times 4, and then it's going to give you plus 40% damage amount to the next bind card used. So it's going to give your Shadow of the Moon a little bit more damage. The second option is going to be very similar to how Karmic Flames worked. It's going to be a much stronger hit with a much more decent damage buff to the next bind used. The first and second one are pretty interchangeable, but obviously if you have morale, the first one is a lot stronger. But the second one is totally fine if you're just trying to, again, stack up for the Giga Strong Shadow of the Moon with infinite Tsukuyomi hit count stacks. So if you're going for that strategy, obviously you prefer the second one because it gives you 20% more damage amount per cast, but otherwise it's about the same thing. The third Oni Hunt is going to be pretty mediocre in my opinion. It's going to be the exact same thing as the original effect, 64 times 3 or 60 times 3. And then if you have no other attack cards in hand, you add 2 hits. So theoretically, this is a times 5 hit. So it is the strongest standalone card. But the issue is that you can't have a Shadow of the Moon in hand. And since you'll be generating so many of those, this Oni Hunt is a little inconsistent. And so you're essentially playing down the damage amount buff to the bind. So this is never take unless you somehow have a strategy for this 5 attack hit count without having any other attacks in hand. Now the fourth Oni Hunt is the one that is, to me, probably the strongest one if you're going for a lot of Shadow of the Moon plus stacking. Obviously, if you're going for hit count stacking, then you don't take this. But otherwise, this is the worst version of Mei Lin's Unity. It's going to read Haste. It's a skill. Create 2 Moon Slash, which are her basic strike cards. Give those cards exhaust and decrease the cost of them until they're used. So it's essentially 2 0-cost strike cards. Now, Moon Slash, obviously basic strike card, but CHIZURU has a potential that gives them 2 hits. So this is essentially 2 Will-O-Wisp stacks. And then with the Tsukuyomi upgrade that I suggested or I recommend, it'll give you another +2 Will-O-Wisp with that. So if you play this version of Oni Hunt, it will give you +4 Will-O-Wisp per, or rather, it's going to be +6 Will-O-Wisp. No, even more. So I can't even do math anymore. It's been a pretty long day. It's +8 Will-O-Wisp per Oni Hunt cast. So if you're going for this more standard CHIZURU build, this is the card I recommend getting a -1 AP Divine Epiphany on and duplicating over and over again, because obviously with Cassius, my entire strategy is to go for 000 spam, so having a 0-cost Oni Hunt with 2 0-cost strikes will help you cycle into those 000s and help you stack up the morale and hopefully get some straights active and then make your Shadow of the Moons more and more powerful. The main issue with Oni Hunt is just the fact that, again, obviously, you're playing with Inhibit, so you actually cannot go super positive like Mei Lin can. And this means that if you're trying to go for like a very AP positive build where you do not use Inhibit, what ends up happening is that your Shadow of the Moon pluses become very weak because you're losing a hit, and that extra losing 33% of your overall damage on a card is very impactful, especially with morale stacks and all that. And so I think this card, if you don't get the Divine Epiphany, or you don't have a sick Cassius and a sick Nia build for CHIZURU or to support CHIZURU, you're probably just better off going like the mass hit count stack on Shadow of the Moon Plus, because the upper limit of Oni Hunt spam can be very low because you simply don't have enough AP to play all the cards you want to play, and that ends up meaning that you don't have enough 000 procs to get the morale you need to actually let your characters do damage in harder content. And so the final Oni Hunt upgrade is going to be an upgrade. It's going to be a unique card, so you cannot dupe this. So it's going to be pretty good if you're farming other characters' decks. It's going to be plus 40% a damage amount to Shadow of the Moon plus, not Shadow of the Moon very specifically. So you have to upgrade this up by 3 in order to have the damage output. And at the start of the turn, you gain 3 Will-O-Wisp. The issue with this card is that you can't duplicate this, and it actually limits your Will-O-Wisp generation a lot. And I think this is mostly meant for people who are trying to farm very specific decks for one character and just want CHIZURU there to cut down on the replication targets when you get to the copy events. This card is probably alright. There might be a build with this that is really obvious that I just don't see. I figure that you're always going to go for the first 2 Oni Hunts if you're going for the hit count stack, just because obviously you can stack that hit count, but this one's only a one-time thing. But otherwise, like if you're going for a very lazy or straightforward and very easy to play CHIZURU build, this one is probably fine because you're getting the Will-O-Wisps automatically and you don't have to think about casting this card over and over again. So I'd rank Oni Hunts as the 4th one being the most versatile / generically playable, and then the second one being the best for the Tsukuyomi hit count stacking, and the first one being decent for that as well, but being a little worse for overall efficiency if you're going for the massive Giga Shadow of the Moon plus slap. And then, yeah, that's going to be it for the Epiphanies. We obviously already went over Shadow of the Moon itself. CHIZURU's Ego Skill is not really applicable that much in Chaos because you'll never stack it up that high, but it is probably one of the highest base damage Ego Skills in the game if you fully stack it. It's going to be 250% damage for 5 Ego points, and then plus 50% for each Shadow of the Moon you create. So in like a longer term fight that's like 5-6 turns long, you can hit 10 Shadow of the Moons very easily. So it's just a really hard hitting whack. But obviously in these hard level contents, a 570% ego damage skill isn't that impressive, but it is quite nice just in a pinch because obviously if you're free to play / low econ CHIZURU like me, you just need to be able to use your ego points somehow, and this ego skill is probably going to be one of your better options out of the characters you have available to you in Chaos. And then potentials, pretty straightforward. She is getting crit chance and crit damage for her later potentials. You're going to get the double hit on Moonslash for her basic card proficiency, and then the other two major potentials are going to give your Moonslash more damage, which is obviously very important if you're going to go for the Oni Hunt style that I'm going for, and the other one is going to buff her bind cards, so both Shadow Moon and Shadow of the Moon Plus. These are all very important to max out and level. Like, you probably want to max everything on CHIZURU besides neutral card upgrades or common cards, just because as a psionic character, there's not very many good common cards to go for. And then for forbidden cards, you really can't go wrong with many of the forbidden cards. I think by far the best forbidden card is going to be Ecstasy of Violence, because obviously with the curse stacks, you can get +4 Will-O-Wisp from Ecstasy of Violence, and then with the Tsukuyomi upgrade Epiphany, you can get +6, so it's generating a full Shadow of the Moon by itself. Portrait of Fury is very alright, but the issue with Portrait of Fury is that it's quite expensive to play for specifically CHIZURU teams, because again, she is usually blocking you off of casting or gaining AP, and so the 1 mana cost of Portrait of Fury really does stack up very, very quickly, unless you're able to discount that with, Karmic Flames or the, that one upgrade on with Shadow of the Moon Plus. Besides that, if you want to go the funny route and just delete Bound at Dusk, you can always just go for Eternal Hunger and then just allow CHIZURU to be a second Eternal Hunger holder for your Nia, so that you can just generate more of those. I don't really know if I'd recommend that much, but it is a funny way to play CHIZURU. Just playing Shadow of the Moons for fun, and just, I guess, maybe you could try going like 111 spam instead of 000 spam, and in that case somehow Cassius ends up being the real star of the show. And if you're playing like this, you're probably just ending up being a worse version of Tressa, but memes are memes, so it could be fine. Weapons and equipment, pretty basic, just like standard DPS things, but the issue is that since she doesn't have any draw of herself, the by far best weapons are going to be ones that give you flat attack or just percent attack. So Tentacle of Chaos is obviously a bit less useful, but you want to go for the Pistol from Cthulhu, maybe just like Sword of Agony. I would say that Obsidian Sword is very mediocre because it is percentage damage amount, and obviously CHIZURU wants the flat, like, plus damage amount that is a flat multiplier. And so the accessories you can get access to for that are going to be things like Emperor's Cube, or the other one that gives plus 30% from an event in the seasonal Chaos. And then for chest piece, Fragment of the Empty Void is probably going to be your best chest piece. There's not very many good chest pieces. Like, obviously you can get the that one chest piece where when you hit, you gain damage amount. That's also very good as an event equipped from Zero, but I don't really remember what the name is off the top of my head. I might edit it in a screenshot in post. And then if you don't manage to get Empty Void, or you don't manage to get the Cthulhu gun, then Saphir of Randomness is just going to be a generically very powerful Cthulhu drop that I could recommend on CHIZURU. Just having more AP at the start and getting a better start for your turns overall will always be very nice. And then for memory fragments, for set effects, I would recommend going for basic attack up, just because it is a style of play you can go for CHIZURU. Otherwise, I don't really know if you want to go for the forces for CHIZURU. I think having crit damage and attack percent is really important, just to let her do more damage. And then you can go for defense or HP or agony or base attack upgrades for the third and final set. And then her most important stats are just very generic, like crit damage up, attack, like, etc. She has no value with extra attack, sadly, no value with damage over time. So you're going for very, very generic damage upgrades. And then for Manifest Egos, as I mentioned earlier, her E2 is by far the most important one, because it gives you a extra Shadow of the Moon when you use Shadow of the Moon Plus, which again really encourages you to cycle Bind 3 instead of going to Bind 5. The first one The first Shadow of the Moon gives you a pretty good damage buff to Shadow of the Moon Plus because it goes from 70 base to 90 base, and obviously the 90 doesn't scale with multiplicative effects, but it is a lot more damage if you have 3 hits for free, and obviously plus 3% to recovery also stacks up pretty quickly. Besides that, I think the next most important upgrade for CHIZURU is going to be E4 and E6, just because Shadow of the Moon will now generate lunar shards, and lunar shards obviously gives you plus 30% flat multiplier to CHIZURU, and since she's such a multi-hit monster, plus 30% will stack up very, very quickly. And then E4 is giving you that lunar shard, and then E6 is giving you just more damage, more hits on Shadow of the Moon Plus. So enabling the cycling more and allowing you to do more damage with Shadow of the Moon Plus and just getting more and higher numbers. Now, would I recommend going for E6? Not really sure. I recommend going for E2 if you have the funds for it, obviously. Going for E2 and then playing around with the cycling of Shadow of the Moon Plus will probably be your best initial investment. And then if you really enjoy her style, then go for E6 might be wise, but I wouldn't really recommend going too crazy until you play her, just because I know there's a lot of people out there that care about numbers and care about performance and care about all that. For team comps, I highly recommend playing Nia Cassius. Mika would be preferred if you could play her or if you could gain AP, but sadly you can't. So therefore, Nia is going to be your next best cycler. Just being able to play Adagio will help. Oh, okay, so really the linchpin of this all is going to be Cassius, because Cassius is the one with the quest system, and then obviously with the final potential. Every time you complete a quest, you're going to gain +1 morale, which is obviously insanely absurd of a effect. So with the strategy that I mentioned earlier, you're going to get a lot more morale for CHIZURU with that. And then because you want to cast a lot of 0 costs, Nia has access to Adagio, which is really powerful for 000. And then obviously, sadly, you won't be able to use the Eternal Hunger flipping with Adagio as effectively, but draw is draw at that point. The AP, you can always choose not to play Bound early and then just cycle until you have everything set up and then play Bound to get the damage in. And with Adagio, and if you get... So you can get some more healing with one of the forbidden cards if you need the healing. But obviously Nia can come with like stuff like Soul Rip to heal you a bit more. And while Nia's healing is not nearly as good as Mika's, you do have ways to enable healing. So having Nia Cassius can give you a little bit of healing if you do have the cycling and the setup for it. And then obviously Cassius with the quest system, recommendations would be getting Dice Trick Upgrade to get more quest cards so you can nicely cycle into more straights. And then having the ideal upgrade for the quest system is going to be the one we can choose. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of restarting the run until you get 000 naturally, which can obviously be very annoying. If you're willing to restart over and over again, then having the initiation and start a random one is totally fine. But if you want to just like actually play the game instantly when you ever queue up, then get the choose if you can. And then everything else is pretty optional for Cassius. You're really just playing him, or rather, the 0 cost double dice is pretty important, but otherwise, you're just playing him for the quest system so that he can stack up your morale and buff CHIZURU's damage really, really high. Now, if you're going for the infinity stacking Tsukuyomi plus hit count into plus 100 hit count on Shadow of the Moon, then you can just go with God's most basic Mika Veronica. Just so that way, because obviously when you're playing for giga high stack value, you don't care about inhibit, so you're just going to go for raw cycling, raw AP, play all of your cards, draw all of your cards, and Mika Veronica is going to be always unchallenged, unmatched for that. And since you're and the only issue is that you're not going to be able to generate nearly as many morale stacks as with Cassius, but since you're playing the cycling deck, you're going to be adding flat damage amount with the Oni Hunt anyways, so you don't need the morale as bad. So having the raw healing output of Mika will obviously be a lot more helpful with that. And then Veronica having Pot of Greed in her kit will be very helpful for that as well. I don't know why they recommend Rei. The issue with Rei is that her multipliers are 1 time and her draws 1 time. And so while she will be good for Chaos, I think, and while she will be, like, you know, serviceable, her cap for CHIZURU is very, very low in my opinion. And she will struggle to really carry you through fights that give you really strict, like really harsh damage debuffs and all that. And I don't know why the game recommends Tressa. Tressa is way better of like an actual carry. And if you're going to downgrade Tressa in order to support CHIZURU, I assume it's only for aesthetic purposes because you have 2 black-haired beauties on the team. And Tressa does have some synergy with CHIZURU in that respect, where you can play Unsheathed Dagger and then utilize the Shadow Dagger creations in order to fuel the Will-O-Wisps. But Tressa has no card draw. She has no real ways of cheating AP. And CHIZURU does not benefit from having Agni applied. So I would not recommend Tressa. I don't know why Smallgate recommends Tressa as a partner. Like I don't even know. I wonder even more about why they recommend Tressa Rei specifically when her best partners as real supports are probably always going to be Cassius +1 of some sort. Like I would rather take Cassius Rei over Tressa because Tressa really does that little for CHIZURU in my opinion. There's probably a lot of other characters that I could work with CHIZURU, but those are just the obvious teams I have in my mind. And yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. If you just wanted to listen to the guy yap about CHIZURU for like 35 minutes, then hopefully this video was good for you. So yeah, thanks for listening in. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye bye.